Hello and welcome back to Presentation Skills. In this part we're going to talk about the principles of layout. So we're going to think about how to get our layout right in a way that helps you get set up to deliver a winning presentation. Don't forget from our first class where we talked about the communication model. Key lesson from that model was that often noise creeps in to the communication between us and our audience through problems in layout, problems that we can overcome, that we can avoid through a little bit of care in how we set ourselves up. And that's what we're going to focus on in this part of our class. So let's think about the basic principle. Well, simple principle, but one that we need to think about, and that's that the layout should make our communication easy. Easy between us and our audience, easy for our audience to engage with what we're trying to communicate to them. So we're concerned with whether the audience can see the presenter, us, whether they can see the screen that we're projecting to, where we've got our PPT or other information, and whether the audience can see the whiteboard and any other audio-visual kind of media that we're actually using in our presentation. So these three need to be our focus. We want, as an audience, to focus on our audience, to think about where they are, who they are, where people are being seated. We want to think about ourselves, the presenter, where we are and where we're going to move. And we want to think about the equipment that we're going to use. Even a simple presentation, even one where we've got a whiteboard and some markers, requires just that little bit of preparation to make sure that it's going to go smooth. Often we forget to check, for example, whether a whiteboard marker works. There's nothing more disconcerting or creating feelings of discomfort than going to use a whiteboard marker and nothing happens, or you realise people can't see clearly. Easy to do, easy to avoid by checking whether that pen works at the beginning and then having a few colours ready on the desk in front of you that you know work. And all that does is give you another little piece of confidence that when you're going to write on the whiteboard, that pen's going to work and it's going to make your life that little bit easier, that little bit smoother, especially when you're feeling nervous. This will help you relax, knowing that things are going to work as you wanted. So each part of the equipment is going to support each other. So a working whiteboard marker is going to support the whiteboard, is going to in turn support us using that whiteboard, and going to help us by us being positioned in the right place to use that. So let's get a little bit more detailed about how each part supports each other. So let's have a little think about a low participation layout. When we walk into a room, one of the first things that we're going to want to do is to figure out where the immovable things are. Where are the things in that room that don't move? Because these are our fixed points, things that we need to work around. These we can't adjust, we can't move. And often it's projection screens. These are screens that are fixed to the wall, so we have to work with that element. Hopefully the whiteboard is separate from your projection screen so that you've got enough whiteboard to use and work with in the room that you're going to present in. Now, as a presenter, we've got choices about where we might position ourselves. So at the moment we're here. Let's have a think as we start to add more elements. Often we're going to have a table. Now, this table is going to have maybe the LCD projector on it, or at least beside us. And on there we're going to have various bits of equipment like our laser pointer mouse, our notes, our pens, our whiteboard pens, And maybe we're also going to have other media like a flip chart, maybe, if it's a more discussive rather than presenting only form of communication. We've got our power cables, and we've got now our audience. Let's just add the audience, and there we are. So now we've got a fairly typical layout, but let's have a little think about this layout and why it can be a good winning layout for you. So let's highlight some parts of this layout. Let's get into a little bit of detail here so that we can talk about each element here. Now, by standing here, we've got our presenter here. So who's the people that this presenter needs to worry about? Well, it's the people here, standing right in front of the presenter, because their view to this part of the whiteboard, at least, is potentially blocked. So we need to be aware of that. We need to think about that. Who else do we need to think about? We need to think here that these people over here, sorry, we've jumped forward here, let's jump back. We need to think about these people here, because these people on the edge of the room are going to have difficulty seeing the PPT on the screen over here. So we need to be conscious if we notice these people are struggling to see the image on the screen, that maybe we need to move ourselves over here, out of the way a little bit. So we need to be conscious that our movements are going to be in this kind of zone here, moving around here from left to right, making sure that when we've written something on the whiteboard here, that we don't obscure the view of our participants here. And when these people on the left side want to see the whiteboard, the projection screen, that again, we're not obscuring their view. Notice too how we've got our computer on the table here, along with our notes and our pens. They're all laid out nice and neatly. Now what I suggest you do, get into a habit, knowing your computer's here, beside it you've got your pens, and maybe on the left side you're going to always put your presentation mouse. I know this sounds a little bit detailed, but by doing this it means that when you want a pen, you know you just reach out on the right side. When you want to find your presentation mouse, it's on the left side. This is a habit that really good presenters get into. Go have a look at Steve Jobs. He's a legendary presenter, and you'll notice how all his tools and equipment that he's going to use in a presentation are almost always in the same place. When he walks on stage, one of the first things he does is open up his water bottle and puts it in the back left-hand side of the stage. When he wants a drink, he knows exactly where it is. When he's going to do a detailed presentation, an explanation of perhaps some software, demonstration, he's got notes, and beside those notes in the top right side are his glasses, so he knows exactly where to reach for them without needing to think about it, because it's become a habit. So here I'm suggesting you decide in your layout here where you want to put these things, so that it's all a nice easy habit for you and everything's in a nice position to find, easy to find. Now over on this side we've got the power cables. These are coming to the computer and anything else that we need to run. Now these power cables are running across here to maybe the wall socket to plug into the power source over here. Again, this is a simple detail. They're not running up and down the room. They could be running from the table here or across here, as often people have them. But why over here? Well, over here, they're right out of the way, so that when I'm moving, they're not in my way. Let's clear this ink. We've got rather a lot of ink on the page here. So here we are. We can see now that the power cables are not running it over here, for example, back and forth here, because this is where I'm going to move. I might move out to get close to my audience and come back here. So this kind of area in here, I don't want anything because this is where I'm moving. I don't want the power cables in case I trip over them. What happens when you trip over a power cable? Everything turns off, and then you've got to wait for projectors to start up again or for your laptop power to be restored. It's an inconvenience, something that we can easily avoid by taking a little bit of care and thinking through where we're putting our equipment. Now, let's have another think about another key element in our layout, and that is all the people up here. In other words, our audience. Now, sometimes the room isn't full, so we can think, where do we want our audience to be? So maybe if our room's half full, I'm going to ask people to all be on my right side here. And I'm going to ask maybe someone sat over here. I'm going to ask them to move over here. Don't be shy about doing this. You can just say, excuse me, I think if you move over to the right side of the room, you're going to have a much better view. It's going to work much better for you. And most people will happily move. You're creating a win-win situation because they're going to get more from your presentation by moving, and you're going to feel better because they're going to be more responsive, they're going to be more connected to your presentation. So don't be shy to also see this opportunity to move your audience from places where they're going to have a less good view to one over here, where they're going to have a much better view of you, the media that you're using. See, the person sat here now can see everything that we've talked about in terms of the principle. So they can see the whiteboard over here, the whiteboard here. They can see the projection screen here. They can see the flip chart, and they can see me as a presenter. That's a much more winning strategy. So, very quickly, a few simple things that we've done here. We've decided where we're going to stand in this situation, where we're going to move. We've got the cables out of the way. We've decided and are aware of who can see what in the room, so we can move to make sure people can see the media that we're using. We've maximised the chance that people are going to be able to see the media by moving them in the room, if that's possible, if there's free seats. So we're creating a winning layout strategy here. Let's move forward now a little bit. So we can see when we're setting up, let's have another thought about some of the equipment that we're going to set up in a little bit more detail. Now, the LCD projector, well, it has its advantages and disadvantages. One thing that we need to be clear is when we're setting it up, that the image should fill up the screen, and we need to position it carefully. Sometimes the projector isn't fixed and we have a portable, a movable projector. When we're setting it up, we want to make sure that image is really nice, filling the screen as much as possible, that it's not angled in some weird way, and that it's nice and clear, it's well focused. So take that little bit of time to set that up. How do we do that? Well, again, we do that by arriving a little bit early, a little bit ahead of our presentation to check the equipment. Check that the settings are how we want them. If it's a projector that we've got to set up, then we need that little bit of extra time to get it positioned on the table so that we can get the image like we want. Make sure that it's parallel with the sides of the screen, the image is sharp, and it's not at a weird angle. This takes a little bit of time to get right, but the payoff is high. So say, focus it, and don't forget that equipment does break down. So what we're going to talk about is the value of notes. Now, if you've got good notes and the projector stops working, your notes can help you use some other media like for example the whiteboard or your flip chart, to at least communicate some of the key ideas that you wanted to communicate. Perhaps not so smoothly and so beautifully as if you've got the projector, but at least you can communicate some basic ideas. So the backup is your notes, and these notes help you know what to maybe write on the whiteboard, the flip chart, or any other media that you can still use while the projector's broken down. So your audience is going to admire you if, when something goes wrong, you've got a backup strategy to deal with the problem. Now, layout, in terms of checking, go through, anticipate your movements, think where you're going to want to move. Good presenters do move a little bit. They don't move too much. They use their body language to emphasize key points, but they also use their movement to add a little bit of energy to their presentation. So think where you're going to move and make sure that the wires and your equipment is not in the way, but it's still supporting you when you move in your presentation space. Think about your audience and where they're going to move to. So again, make sure wires and equipment are out of the audience's way when they're going to come into the room, when they're going to be seated, when they're going to move during a break, for example. And check with the audience if they can actually clearly see. Don't be shy to ask them. Are you okay? Can you see the screen? Are the words big enough over here? If they're not, make some adjustment. Why? Because if you don't, then they're going to get distracted. They're not going to keep a good level of attention. And that gives you negative feedback and you think your presentation's going wrong. But it's not going wrong, it's just that you haven't taken care of your layout issues. Another simple tip is know your equipment. Get your presentation mouse. Make sure that you know which button turns on the laser pointer. Don't test it by pointing it at the audience and blind someone. Test it by pointing it at the ceiling and seeing if you get the right dot that you're looking for. And know the presentation controls so that when you go to press a button, something weird doesn't happen. Too many times I see people grab the presentation mouse, press a button, everything goes black, and they think the equipment's broken. But on many presentation mouses, there's one little button you can press, and it's designed to make the screen go black. So get familiar, and when do you want to get familiar with that? Before you start your presentation. If you're doing a team presentation, make sure each person in your group knows what the buttons do on the presentation mouse. Simple things that you can do like this will really help you when you come to present. You're not going to have any surprises. You press the button and the slide moves forward. You press the other button, it goes backwards. You press another button and you get the pointer and you can point at things. Sometimes if you feel nervous and it's going to shake a little bit, you can maybe use another hand to support so it doesn't shake so much, or you just point quickly, briefly but clearly, and then stop pointing. And then if you're shaking a little bit, it isn't so clear, it isn't so obvious. And that again helps you feel less nervous. So, what's another key point? Another key point when you're using the presentation mouse is you don't want to point it at the screen because it's not talking to the screen, it's talking to the computer. So you want to point your presentation mouse to the computer, and then you've got a better chance that it's going to operate as you expect. Don't worry if it doesn't. You can always use the keys on the keyboard on your computer, or the mouse. Just switch over and no one's going to notice that you've had a small problem with the presentation mouse. As I say, keep a printed set of notes for a really important presentation as a backup in case you've got a problem with some of your equipment. So here's a few tips to help you get set up. If you arrive early, you follow these kind of tips and go through some of this thinking, you'll find your presentation starts off much more smoothly and you set out to win. So this about wraps up this segment. So go away, have a think and get ready for your next presentation.